Hey friends, let's talk about anxiety. As an entrepreneur, you're going to face stressful situations. There are some things about entrepreneurship that are just inherently more stressful. Now, there's also some things that lower your stress, like being in control. That's something that helps to tamper some of the stress, the anxiety that you naturally face. You face more stressful situations, and that's the stress, anxiety inducing side, but you also have more control. So that tends to balance it out. And of course, this depends a lot on your beliefs and what you're telling yourself, that internal narrative about whether things are going well and whether you do fine if things that you're working on now fell apart. There's a lot of different psychological aspects that interplay with your neurological predispositions to determine how much stress you're going to feel as you walk down this entrepreneurial journey. But here's something that we do know for sure about anxiety. If you're a person who experiences more anxiety than is helpful or useful on your entrepreneurial journey, then I want you to think about these two things today. The first is that your best defense against anxiety is offense. It's not trying to not feel anxious. Rather, it's trying to focus more on what you do want. This is about shifting the focus of your attention. It's something that has a very powerful effect on your overall quality of life, regardless of whether you experience a lot of anxiety. But for those of you who are more on the anxious or stressed side, it's especially important that you focus on what you do want, not on what you don't want. It's the same direction. You're still going to do things to move away from the things that are stressing you out. But by focusing more on what you do want, you fill your mind, your attention focuses on things that reduce your anxiety, and you're thinking about the next steps you can take to achieve something that you want. And so that puts you back psychologically into a state of control. You're in control of taking the actions to move towards what you want. Just a quick example to bring this to life. If you imagine being in a boat that capsized in the ocean, you're close to an island, and you think you could probably swim to it, but it's dark, and you're scared that some shark or something's going to come up and bump against you and create this sense of terror. The best thing you can do is focus on that island and focus on how you want to get there, and then focusing on how can you make your arms swim to get you to that island, right? That shifts your focus. And the more you try to look down into the dark water, which does nothing, the more you're going to elevate your anxiety, right? So that's what I mean by focus on what you do want, not so much on what you don't want. The other thing I want you to know about stress and anxiety is that, and this is a related concept, is that you can't beat anxiety by controlling it. The nature of anxiety disorders, in fact, in the clinical side, where anxious thoughts or feelings get to a point where they're impeding your ability to function well, is that people essentially start trying to control the anxiety, and their coping efforts, their attempts to control the anxiety, are actually the things that make the anxiety worse. And you could say that all anxiety disorders are essentially disorders of excessive protection of the self. Now, of course, there are neurological predispositions that cause some people to be more vulnerable to experiencing stress and anxiety and reacting to it when encountered in your environment. And if there is the psychological factor that has this interplay with your neurological predispositions and your environmental conditions at any given time, there's that trio of factors affecting how the stress or anxiety is going to express itself for you personally. So this is not meant to blame you. It's just meant to say, this is how anxiety works. That when we look at the disorders of anxiety, like generalized anxiety disorder, for example, where we find some people worry so much that it becomes debilitating to them on their quality of life, if nothing else. And that's from worrying as a way of trying to reduce a feeling of anxiety. And the more you worry, it feels good, but it's actually making the anxiety worse. OCD, it's a checking, usually starts with either rituals or checking behaviors, like checking to make sure the stove is off. And when you do that, you check, oh, yes, the stove is off. It gives you this temporary little relief from anxiety. So it feels good. And yet what that does is it reinforces the checking behavior. And so it becomes, again, a place where you get stuck trying to do things all day long to control your anxiety. It was just stress before that. It was just a moment of anxiety, but it turns into mental habits that create an actual disorder where you're not functioning in life anymore very well because of your attempts to control the anxiety. Now, if you're not struggling with an anxiety disorder, but you just have some stress, or you worry a little bit more than is healthy and useful for your entrepreneurial efforts, then what can you do with this information? How can you focus more on what you do want and less on what you don't want? How can you actually apply this concept that by trying to control stress or anxiety, it gets worse? And the answer is that these two concepts are interrelated. I'm just saying the same thing in different ways. I'm saying by putting effort on trying to reduce anxiety directly, you'll actually make it worse. So don't do that. And I'm saying focus more on what you do want, which takes your attention away from trying to control the anxiety, and it puts it toward the life-giving, forward-focused things that you're trying to focus your life on and build your actions around. That gives you back the feeling of control, because now you're working on something, you're doing something that's moving you towards your goals, and that reduces stress. This is true in any situation. So if you're a person that feels even just that to-do list anxiety, where some weeks you show up and your team has been waiting on you for answers, you've got clients or customers who need help with certain things and they're waiting on you to get back to them, or maybe business partners, you have too many things just to keep up on for your maintenance recurring tasks, let alone creating time to work on the longer term projects that maybe you committed to yourself or others that you'd work on. When that kind of to-do list anxiety builds up, again, you don't want to try to control it by ignoring stuff that's on that list. You don't want to try to control the list by saying, I'm just done with entrepreneurship, I'm out of here. What you want to do is take a small step toward what you do want. So you want to feel less confused and overwhelmed by how in the world can I finish all of these things. And so it's just a matter of doing a brain dump. That's the first step. Get it all down on paper, and then start eliminating the things that you would like to do, but you can't. Create a have-to list and a want-to list. Get rid of the want-to list. Now we're looking at the have-to, and now we're going to rank those based on consequence if they didn't get done. And we're just going to focus on a few of those. What you do when you create this kind of proactive approach, when you start looking at your list and just giving yourself permission to not be superhuman, you're not trying to not feel anxious. Rather, what you're trying to do is use the power that you have to go after some good outcomes, and you're actively moving toward that now. So you're giving your excess mental energy that comes with anxiety a place to go. You're using it in a productive way. So if you have anxiety, you should always play offense. That's one key message that I want to get across today. Here's the second idea I want to get across, that you should play offense whenever you start feeling stressed or anxious, because it's the only way to redirect that excess mental energy that comes with feeling anxious in a productive way that in the long run will actually decrease your anxiety. If you do that, if that becomes your habitual way of responding to stress, you'll experience less and less stress over time, because you are restructuring your psychological habits and the way you respond to the natural stressors that are going to come from your environment, from that part of the triad, the neurological predisposition, the environmental stressors, and then that psychological response to those other two. So what you're doing is you're using this one concept, play offense, to capture what we've learned from studying all of the ways that we humans get caught in these anxiety spirals. And you're taking the most powerful elements of that, and you are focusing on what you do want. Playing offense, going after what you do want, sometimes means thinking really big. So if you're feeling like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, sometimes you just need to literally think bigger, like almost like the 10x type thinking, in terms of not just how am I going to deal with these two awful situations, but how could I go for something that I really, really want? Okay, maybe instead of trying to solve either of these solutions, I'm going to go create a resort on an island like I've always wanted to. That's just kind of a random example of the kind of outside the box thinking that sometimes helps people to shake off the feeling that they have to somehow control reality or control the stress. And it helps you instead to refocus on what you do want, even if it's something that's a little bit outside of your reach. So if you have to have surgery on your knee or your shoulder or something, and that creates a sense of stress or vulnerability or anxiety from creating that long recovery process where your body's more fragile than you're used to, by focusing on what you do want and thinking bigger, you might say, you know what, I'm going to go into that surgery healthier than I've ever been before. And so what happens is you're playing offense, right? And then you start thinking, and I'm going to come out of it doing exercise for the rest of my body while I'm waiting for the injured part to get rehabbed. You're now creating the sort of positive energy and positive momentum that takes your excess energy and it gives it somewhere to go. And now you're feeling better, you're actually healthier. And this creates the positive cycle that allows people who have anxious tendencies to thrive. So here's your challenge for this week. If you're a person who experiences anxiety, just think about this question: how could I take some of that energy and use it to play offense? Talk to you again next week.